Hello, dear sewers. Today I'm going to show you how to do a rolled hem like this using a rolled hem foot. Rolled hems are the fastest way to do a hem, and they're also the cleanest looking, I think. You don't really have to do any pressing or measuring to get started, and this is what they use in manufacturing and in alterations. Basically in the sewing industry, it's really common to use a rolled hem instead of what most home sewers do, which is like folding and ironing and folding and ironing. There are applications when you would want to do that, but for most times you're probably just going to want to use a rolled hem. But these things are notoriously difficult to learn how to use. So today I'm going to show you a couple of tricks for how to use it. And if you've tried to use one before and you've struggled with it, I'm going to show you a sort of foolproof method to get a good clean hem every single time. And then once you have that mastered, I'll show you what you can dabble with to kind of grow your expertise with the rolled hem. So to do this, you will need to have a rolled hem foot. The one I'm using is a 1/8 inch rolled hem. What that means is it's not the size of the rolled hem it's going to create, it's actually how far away the stitch is. So you can see that the stitches are 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, but the actual hem itself ends up being more like 3/16. The size of hem foot that you use will depend on the thickness of your fabric. If you have a really thick fabric, you're going to want to use something bigger than 1/8. And in those cases, sometimes if the fabric is too thick, then I wouldn't even use a rolled hem foot. But for most like dress weight fabrics, then this 1/8 is pretty good. I guess maybe there's a 1/16, which you would use for like tulle or chiffon, but I actually just use this size for tulle and chiffon as well. And if it's too thick to fit into this, then I just don't use it at all. I will put a link in the description to where you can find one of these, and once you have that, then you just need a piece of fabric that you're going to do your test sewing on. And to begin, I want us to start with a hem that's completely straight. So my seam here is on the grain, and this is going to be the easiest way to learn because once your hem starts getting curved, then it does get a little bit harder. So let's start with this to practice, and then we'll move on to the harder thing next. Okay, so first I'm going to show you the easiest way to do this. This way takes a lot longer because you have to sew the hem twice, but this is more of a foolproof way, especially if you're first learning how to do this. So we're just going to start by putting the fabric, wedging it inside here to this little fold. And when you sew it, we're just trying to get it to sew so that it flips it like that. Okay? And you really have to kind of guide it so that it doesn't roll too much, because what it's designed to do is roll the fabric twice. But we don't want to do that because that's where a lot of people struggle with. They're not able to get that balance between it folding once and folding twice, and so it ends up doing both and it looks really messy. So you're just going to give it barely enough fabric into this little loopy, flippy part right here so that it only folds it once. So you can see it's barely curling under. And just experiment with it to see how little you can give it. And you see here that my fold is really narrow. Okay, and then when you get to a seam, this part is too thick to go through here. So what we need to do is trim this. So I like to trim it sort of at a little bit of a triangle angle like that so that it's not thick here. And what a lot of people do to secure this is they'll stitch this closed on all of their seams. Mine was serged, so it's not very secure, but if you had a back stitch there, then you wouldn't be cutting through the back stitch, so it should not unravel. But if for some reason it does start to unravel, then what you should do beforehand is just reinforce all of your seams there. But I'm not going to do that because I'm just going to pinch it and hold it together like that. It's not the technical way to do it, but I have a little bit more practice, so I'm just going to sew it like this. And because this part is thicker, it always needs just a tiny bit more help going through. So I'm going to put a little bit of tension back here while it sews. So again, you can see that this is just barely curling up into there. And that's what that looks like on the back there. Okay, so once you've done all the way around the amount that you want to sew, I'm going to take this out to show you what it looks like at the end. So let's say we're sewing like this, we're sewing, you're getting close to the end here, or rather to the beginning where you started. So what you're going to do now is just lift up the presser foot a little bit and wedge that flip of fabric out, and then just keep sewing down. So I continued my seam manually without feeding it through that little metal flippy part. And it effectively does the same thing. So imagining that you've done this around the entire area that you want to hem, now what you're going to do is the exact same thing, but just again. So we did one flip, now this is going to do a second flip for us. So in order to get this started, let's just do our little helper flip like that. And then as you're sewing, you're going to just wedge this in there. It naturally wants to pull it in, so you don't have to try too hard. It's just going to pick it up itself. And now I'm doing the same thing where it's just barely folding. And you can see that it's now folding that extra edge under. So on this side now we have a really beautiful, clean rolled hem. One thing that you can do if your hem here was not so clean, let's say that you had too much extra fabric here, what you could do is trim that fabric away. I don't have any to show you, but you could trim it down so that it's this width. If you do it right the first time, you don't have to trim the whole thing, but if it was too big, too much fabric there, then it is going to kind of get in the way when you start to do the second one. So you want to make sure that there's not really too much extra fabric here on the other side of your stitching. So again, I'm just going to continue. It's really just barely flipping in there. And then this part, it's too thick to go through here, so don't even try it. So what I'm going to do again is lift up the presser foot, fold that down, and this will be even harder to go through. Even though it's not going through there, it still kind of gets stuck on this lump. So I'm going to pull back here, and it still gets stuck no matter what sometimes. So I may have to lift up the presser foot and just pull this fabric back a little bit in order to help it go through. Okay, and once you've cleared that, then you can start to wedge this back in again. Okay, so it looks like that. And then again, imagining that we are coming around to complete the hem. It's going to be the same thing. We're getting really close to where we started here, so I'm just going to wedge that out and finish sewing. And with that, you have a perfectly sewn rolled hem. So this is technically not the correct way to do this, and it's not the way that maybe the instructions will teach you, but this is by far the most foolproof and easy way to do it. It just takes a little bit longer because you're sewing it twice. And I will do this method if it's a trickier fabric or if the fabric is really curved. So if it's a circle skirt, for example, I'm not even going to bother with the harder method. I'm just going to do it this way. But let me show you the harder method next, and you'll see why I prefer this, just because it takes less time. Okay, so the harder method is going to start the same. We're just going to give it a little helper fold like that. But instead of folding it once like I did for the easy way, I'm folding it twice. So there's my helper fold, and the end goal is to have it do exactly that for us. It's going to flip it. So I'm stitching just a little bit, and then I'm going to wedge that in there. I'm getting a little close to my seam here, so I'm just going to trim that right now. So one of the methods is to actually just fold it like that. And I'm coming up to this seam here, so again, I'm going to take it out. This is the same practice for every rolled hem, no matter what. And then the other technique is I'm not folding it at all. I'm just finding the right ratio of how much to feed it. So this is a pretty generous fold over, but I'm not folding it like that. I don't know how much this makes sense because it's really intuitive and it comes with practice, but it also depends on how thick your fabric is. But you can kind of see that when I fold it over like that, it's about the amount that it is actually going to end up hemming in the end. So that's like 3/8 of an inch. So I'm folding it like that, and I'm watching my output here. And I'm making sure that it's not taking too much or too little. And that ends up being perfect. This one takes a lot more practice, so you should start with the other way to begin with. And the starting and stopping is going to be the same as we did it before. You're going to always sort of ease out the fabric from under the loop and just manually sew it down to finish it off. Okay, so we finished with that fabric, which was really straight, but now I'm going to show you on a more practical application, which is a more circular curved hem. This is like a really full A-line skirt, so it has a little bit of curve to it. And this is going to be a little bit harder to sew because it's not straight. It's kind of has a mind of its own. So I'm going to show you how to do that as best as I can explain it. So again, I always start out with my helper folds, folding it once or twice depending on which method you're going for. I'm going to show you the harder method this time now, because the easy method is pretty much always easy and straightforward, and the same principles apply. So let's try it. So I sewed for a bit, and then that just kind of pops into there. So the secret with the curved hem is you have to kind of sew it at a curve. Otherwise it starts to pucker and just kind of do nightmarish things because you're trying to force something that's curved into being a straight shape, but it doesn't like that. So I'm always feeding it into the machine in this curved motion. Another thing that can be really difficult if your fabric is really stretchy or your weave is a little bit less tight. This is a very tight weave fabric, so it's easier to sew with. But if it's not, then you have to be careful not to stretch it here. So I'm like barely holding this. I'm just letting the machine pull it through on its own and suggesting this sort of curved shape and just gently giving a little bit of fold over to the fabric. So you can see here that I actually didn't fold it enough. My fabric is poking out. And that can be the problem with these really curved hems. So that meant that I'm not folding it over enough. So I actually need to fold it over more. And I'm coming to this curve, so I'm taking a chunk out there. And also my seam isn't even, so I'm just going to trim that. You should do all this beforehand to prep. Don't do like I do. And I'm not even going to bother to try to get the rolled hem foot to do that part for me. So with this one, I'm actually discovering as I do it that this fabric is thin enough that I can do the double fold like this. So I'm folding it twice. And it's creating a really beautiful, perfect hem. Sometimes your fabric is too thick, so you can't do that. And that part was really straight, but now I'm getting back into the curve. So folding it twice becomes a little bit trickier because it's now a curved seam. But if you take it in smaller bits and kind of use both hands even to guide it through, it can maintain that curved shape better. So I'm remembering even as I do this that I do prefer to fold it like this. Sometimes relying on that one fold is just not enough. But if your fabric is too thick, it's not going to work like that. This is going to be just really chunky, or it just won't even fit through the machine, or through the presser foot rather. And I can feel here that my fold is not going to work because this is really curved right here. It's going to create too thick of a curve. So I have to really take it in small little pieces as I fold it. Kind of like when you're hemming something that's curved, you have to really do it in small chunks because otherwise it puckers if you iron it. This is kind of the same thing. Okay, so this is definitely a more advanced outcome to be able to do it like this. And even still, you can see that my hem is a little bit stretched out here. Thankfully, ironing and steam will fix this up a bit. But if you do it the way that I showed you, which I'm calling the easy way, you probably won't have this problem at all because that is just like the cleanest, easiest way to make a perfect rolled hem. It just takes more work. So, and you can kind of see the parts where the fabric was straighter. I had a lot less issue with it than where it was curved. But all in all, it ends up being a much faster way to do a hem, either method that you use, because there's really no ironing until it's done, and then you just press it to make it look better. So try out doing a rolled hem both ways and let me know what you think about either way. I would love to know if this helped you at all, and I hope that it just makes hems a less headache for you in general. I actually really enjoy doing rolled hems. I think that they're a lot of fun. So give it some practice and let me know what your results are in the comments. Thank you for watching and happy sewing!